Welcome to Star Campus. The topic of today's webinar is how do I organize my data for my needs? Thank you for joining today. My name is Elke Fuchs and I'm happy that we meet here at the Star Campus. We have the following on the agenda: the directory structure, project administration and scopes, why does Transit suggest certain folders, project independent possibilities for data storage, organizing reference material, and organizing terminology. So let's start. During installation, Transit will install this directory structure. Basically, it is always on the C drive in the public user folder, and there is a Transit Next folder. Transit Next, Config, DB, and Project. These are the most important folders we are dealing with when we work with Transit. The config folder has 4 subfolders, but from the subfolders we only need to deal with the folder customers, global, and users. So for today's webinar, we will talk about these folders among other things. The DB folder, for instance, is for the storage of databases. First, let's start what happens when we create a project. You always encounter the reference card administration. Of course, you give your project a name and then you select a scope. The scope determines the accessibility of the project. So when you choose the scope global and you work in a team and your data is located in your intranet, all your team members or your team colleagues have access to the project. The corresponding folder, which is used for storing this, is the global folder in the folder config. So if you want to have your team colleagues working with you together on the same project, you choose the scope global. After having chosen the scope global, and one of the next reference card is the reference card folders. So according to the scope you chose in the reference card administration, Transit will suggest you a working folder. The working folder has the purpose of containing the language pairs, receiving the language pairs which are created during import. You can choose from different folder hierarchies. We have here what Transit is suggesting you. And you see, here is project. This folder corresponds to this folder in the directory structure. So we have Transit Next, project, the project name, and this will be a folder. And in this folder, Transit will store the language pairs. Let's have a look at another situation. We create the project, we have the reference card administration, but now we choose the scope user. And user in this case is Frau Fuchs. And the user is always linked to the login and to the user's folder. So we have this here. We have Again, the config folder and then a subfolder called Frau Fuchs. Here, the project availability is only given for me, for my user. If you work in a team, you are able to restrict the accessibility in storing certain projects under the scope user. Then, in the next step, you will select a working folder. Again, according to the scope we chose in administration, Transit will suggest a working folder to create the working folder in a certain structure. So, for the scope user, and if I agree to the suggestion of Transit, Transit will create under the folder projects here a folder with my username and the name of the project. I could also change this now, like into project, so not using the user folder. This depends on you. How you want to organize yourself. If you do not work in a team, so if you were having everything locally, well, this is completely open how you organize yourself. Then let's have a look of another situation. When we select the scope customer, there is another information also important, which is the customer name. And this corresponds with this folder, config customers, and in this case the customer is called Starship. The accessibility in the team, all the other team members who have access to the folder in the intranet, they just need the customer Starship. So, and then they have access. Or just imagine you have certain teams and Team A is responsible for Starship projects and Team B might be responsible for others, so that you can work on the network. You can choose here the customer Starship. Everything is still on the network for the backup, for example, but still it's organized under a certain folder for the certain teams. As a consequence of this scope, Transit can suggest the following working folder. Again, always Transit uses this path, Transit Next Projects, and then the customer name, Starship, and the name of the project. You see now that the folder hierarchy brings up everything which I can choose from. So what you want to choose here, this is completely up to you. Transit will suggest this standard project working folder hierarchy. And this path corresponds here. Projects, customer name, and the working folder. When you unpack a PPF, you will get the same questions as file name and the scope, because Transit will also need to store the project under a certain scope, and according to the scope it will ask you also for a working folder. So these two dialog windows are the same when you unpack a PPF. And again, you see here I have chosen the scope global, so customer is not available, and all the others which have the scope customer involved. So that's why Transit does show only user and project, or a completely different photo one if you need it. You can determine the suggestion Transit gives you for the working folder. Let me show you how this is done in Transit. The setting is done in the user preferences. Sometimes people just don't think about that there might be some possibility to determine things. So let me see, working folder. So when we select the scope while unpacking or creating a project, we can tell Transit, okay, give me always the scope global, give me always the scope customer, so that you don't have to think about this. And according to the scope, you can also set a default folder hierarchy. Yeah? If you want to store the project definition globally, but you want the working folder always with the username and then the project, you can determine it here and telling Transit when this default setting applies. This can save a few clicks. There is more to scopes and data organization in Transit. And let me show you again something which has to do with who in my team needs to get what kind of information. We have here a project, and let's say I am the project manager, and I now do an import. During import, Transit brings up this dialog. This dialog is called Check Segmentation. This means Transit sees words with full stops, and Transit does not know, is this an abbreviation or not? And here you get the list for all the instances Transit does not know. Can I cut up the sentence here or not? So we see here, for example, prof, and we get an example down here, our professional translation tool. Oh, this is an abbreviation. We need the complete sentence here. We cannot have it split into two segments. And the same applies to professional in capital letters. Okay. When we click now OK, Transit asks us for a scope. So again, if you work by yourself, if you don't work in a team, it doesn't matter where you store this. If you work in a team, you can say, well, this is a customer specific abbreviation. I just want them to have it for now for this only project. Or you can say, well, prof with followed by full stop will always be an abbreviation no matter what. You can store this globally. That means the standard abbreviation list will be extended with these two abbreviations. For now, I store it in the project to make it available only for this project. Okay. I open up the language pair. Here we go. And something similar with the scope is if we do search for something. Let's say we search for the word transit. I have here the Find dialog open, and I let Transit highlight and find for me all the instances where transit is used. In my case, transit is highlighted in light green. If I want to search for this project name, or if I have just the intention, well, this search I have to do with every project I get. You can save it. And you save it here. And I just give it a name. And again, we're asked for the scope. If you work by yourself, doesn't matter. If you want to make it available for all your colleagues in the team, save it under the scope Global. And next time, maybe one of your colleagues who is substituting you during your vacation can just load it. And here it is in the list, and open it and use it. Here, this globe stands for global scope. Very similar to this are segment filters. For example, we have here the segment and want to insert a comment to this, just as an example. I insert the comment here. So this is a not translated segment, but I give it a comment, let's say for the translator to check maybe the source again. Okay. Now, me as a translator, I know that my project manager has given me some comments. I will do a segment filter here. I go to view and I can create a filter. And I go to the reference card segment info and select with comments. And again, I can save it. I give it a name. And again, I can select the scope, who shall be able to work with this. You know, when you work in a team, sometimes the information or the storage is just super fluent. For if you store everything in global, which is, and the list gets longer and longer, but your colleagues won't need this. So you would choose another scope to prevent getting the list too long for all your colleagues. Now I do apply filter, and exactly, oh, I didn't save it. I switch off the filter. Where is it? I now get it in my list with comments, and there we go. So again, maybe one of your colleagues or yourself have a very nice defined segment filter who is really with all kinds of things which is really handy for you. Of course, if everybody shall use it, just store it under global. You can take off or switch off the segment filter here. There is more for the scope and more possibilities when we can store data for our purposes. For example, here, during review. If you receive a project, let's check the project settings here. If you receive a project or create a project as a project manager, you have this reference card here, the format check. All the options which you tick at project manager will come to the translator and automatically this will be the options the translator will check while performing the formatting codes check. I click on OK. Exactly these options are reflected here in the tab Review in Options. So in this case, exclusively markups and length check is ticked, but probably I also want to check and autocorrect leading blanks or white spaces or trailing blanks. And that I do not have to select this all the time when I do my review before I send back my translation. You can save it. And always when you have here a save as, you can give a name. Like this. And again, scope, global project or users. Save. And if I do OK, I can here select it from the list and perform the formatting codes check without having to select all the options over and over again. There are more instances where we store and save user-defined data, which is in the tab View, like how the language pair is displayed. This is done here. And the window set is stored here. And always when you see information in brackets, it is the scope where it's stored. Your user-defined settings are as a standard. Transit suggests to store it in the scope user, but if you decide otherwise, you can do so. Okay, let's go back to the project settings. Let's have a look at this tab here. This is the tab Reference Material. Reference material in Transit is language pairs. We have the possibility to choose Add Project, which means I just take a previous project which is finished and I want to use this as reference. Or I can add files. Just pick out a certain language pairs which I want to use for pre-translation, if I do also the import, or if I am the translator, I want to use it for fuzzy matches. We recommend to work with folders. To organize your reference material in folders, meaning like a text type, or organize it according to subjects or according to certain customers. Transit supports you in organizing your reference material in folders. Let me show you how Transit does this. This is done down here, reference material. Copy current project to reference folder. We recommend to use this as soon as the project is done. The language pair is translated, it is finished and ready to be used for the next project. And as soon as this takes place, you just copy all the language pairs from this project into your reference pool. Transit suggests a destination folder. I can have a user-defined one, which is here. And then I can tell Transit, copy just the language pair unchanged right into this folder. Or please add the project name as a prefix to the name of the language pair. Or copy the language pairs into a folder which is the project name. So this makes it easy for you to organize your reference material. So let's say I just copy it right into this pool, and I want Transit to add the prefix. And it tells me if I have the same one, and I say yes, replace. Yes, I want to do this. Okay, and when I open the folder, which is here, Transit shows me here the language pair, which is ready for being used for the next project. In general, Transit helps us to organize data, and Transit also helps us to predefine folders which we need during our work, during project creation or exchange projects. This predefinition can be done in user preferences. Here, folder selection. So, for example here, when we create or import a project, we can determine that Transit always suggests the ref pool folder. Or if we want to pack the project, where shall the PPF go? In this case, it will be the working folder. Here, this folder selection dialog is very helpful to prevent that we have to browse through huge directory structures, especially when we work in teams, and it helps for consistency in your projects. Now, a few words to the organization of terminology. Okay, let's go back to the project settings. We have here the tab Dictionaries. Here we see the project dictionaries. We have two dictionaries selected, Dic1 and Dic2. Both of them are on the database Termstar Next. This means that dictionaries are always on a database. There is always the structure of database containing a dictionary. You can organize a dictionary like this, that you have all your dictionaries on one database. You can do this. Or that you have searched for each customer, a database maybe, and do all the dictionaries into that certain customer database. You don't have to split dictionaries according to languages, because all the languages can easily be handled within one dictionary, and automatically according to the project languages, for example, Transit will give you the appropriate terminology. In this case, the current dictionary is Dic1. Current dictionary means that if you add terminology, it will automatically go into this dictionary. So, if you have your own glossary and you want to expand it or add terminology to that one, just select it as current dictionary, and you don't have to remember where to add your terminology. When we go down here in our so-called resource bar and open the dictionary, we see all the dictionaries available for this transit version, this transit installation. So we can have it organized according to databases or according to dictionaries. When we have it structured according to databases, we see that we have lots of a few databases which contain more than one dictionary. This is completely up to you. There is one special dictionary which comes into action as soon as we unpack a project. I have here a new PPF and I open it. I store it on the global scope and save it. I can choose user and project. This comes from my user preferences, or I can change this here. And now, this is the point where Transit asks where to store the dictionary. In the PPF, we have also terminology. Every Transit installation has a term star next received database. This is the standard database for Project Exchange. Transit will always suggest I will store this dictionary in the term star received if you don't choose otherwise. Of course, you can select your own, like this, or my database. Doesn't matter. If you want to distinguish between customers, of course, you can select here the appropriate database where the terminology shall go. The terminology will be stored in a dictionary on the chosen database. And I say OK. And here is the unpack original dictionaries, and the project is opened successfully. This was about it I wanted to tell you in this webinar today. I hope I could give you some useful information on data organization in Transit. Coming up next in Star Campus in July, how can I make my work easier with machine translation? And in August, we will be in summer vacation. I also want to recommend that you have a look at our website in the section Star Campus for other webinars in the future. And if there should be any question, just turn to this email address, transit@star-group.net, and we will get back to you with an answer. Thank you for listening today. Bye-bye.